The old man didn't recognize his son at first. Gaetano Crocetti sat in his barber chair at the shop on 4th Street in Steubenville, Ohio, staring at the famous face in the mirror as if trying to solve a puzzle that kept changing pieces. "You look familiar," Gaetano said in heavily accented English, his voice carrying the same musical cadence that had shaped his son's speech patterns. "Are you here for a haircut? I am the best barber in Steubenville. Been cutting hair for 50 years. Dean Martin stood in the doorway of his father's barbershop, watching the man who had taught him everything about work, dignity, and survival struggle to remember his own life. It was November 1978, and Dean had driven from Los Angeles to Ohio after his cousin called with the news that nobody wanted to hear. Gaetano was getting confused. "Papa," Dean said gently, stepping into the shop that smelled of talcum powder and bay rum, exactly as it had when he was 7 years old. "It's me. It's Dino." Gaetano squinted, and for a moment recognition flickered in his dark eyes. "Dino? My Dino?" Then the light faded again. No, my Dino is a little boy. He helps me sweep the floors. You're too old to be my Dino." Dean felt something break inside his chest. His father, who had been the strongest man he'd ever known, was disappearing piece by piece, lost in a maze of failing memory and confusion. The shop was exactly as Dean remembered it from 40 years ago. The red leather barber chairs, the wall of mirrors, the shelf of tonics and pomades, the framed photograph of the old country that Gaetano had hung when he first opened the shop in 1928. But the man behind the chair was a shadow of the Gaetano Crocetti, who had once commanded respect from every man in the Italian district. Mrs. Rossini from next door had been keeping an eye on Gaetano since his wife Angela had died 2 years earlier. She pulled Dean aside while his father rearranged the same bottles on his counter for the 3rd time. "It started small," she whispered in Italian. "He would forget appointments, or tell the same story twice in one conversation. But last month, he got lost walking to the grocery store. The police found him sitting on a bench downtown, confused about where he was." Dean watched his father through the window. Gaetano was now sweeping the floor with mechanical precision, the same routine he'd performed thousands of times. His hands still remembered the motions, even when his mind couldn't remember why. "What does the doctor say?" Dean asked. Mrs. Rossini shrugged helplessly. "Doctor says it's his age, his brain getting old. Says there's nothing to do but wait and watch. But Dino," she placed her hand on Dean's arm, "he can't live alone anymore. Yesterday I found him trying to cook pasta at 3 in the morning. He could burn the whole building down." Dean nodded, understanding the weight of what she wasn't saying. At 81, Gaetano Crocetti was no longer the man who had immigrated from Italy with nothing but determination and a razor, who had built a business with his hands, who had raised 5 children in a language he barely spoke. "Has he mentioned me recently?" Dean asked. "Every day," Mrs. Rossini said softly. "But in his mind you're still 8 years old. He talks about how proud he is that little Dino can sing so beautifully, how you help him in the shop after school. In his memory, you never grew up, never became famous. You're still his little helper." That night, Dean sat in his father's small apartment above the barbershop, watching Gaetano eat dinner with the careful concentration of someone trying to remember how a fork works. The apartment was neat but sparse, furnished with the same simple furniture that had been there when Dean was a child. "Tell me about your son," Dean said, trying a different approach. "Tell me about Dino." Gaetano's face lit up immediately. "Ah, mio figlio. My boy, he's special. 7 years old, voice like an angel. Every morning before school, he helps me sweep the shop, and he sings while he works. Italian songs, American songs, makes up his own songs. The customers, they love him." Dean felt tears threatening as he listened to his father describe him as a child with perfect clarity, while unable to recognize the man sitting across from him. "What do you hope for him? For little Dino?" "I hope he finds his way in America," Gaetano said, his voice becoming serious. "I hope he learns English better than his papa. I hope he never has to work as hard as I do, but I hope he learns to work with dignity. And I hope he remembers where he comes from, remembers his familia, even if he goes far from here." The irony was devastating. Gaetano had gotten exactly what he'd hoped for his son, but now he couldn't remember any of it. Dean made a decision that would change the next 3 years of his life. Instead of putting his father in a care facility, instead of hiring nurses and maintaining his distance, he decided to come home. Not permanently, His career still demanded his presence in Los Angeles and Vegas, but regularly. Every month, Dean would quietly fly to Ohio and spend a week being not Dean Martin the entertainer, but Dino Crocetti, Gaetano's son. The key was not fighting his father's confusion, but entering into it. Dean learned to be whoever his father needed him to be on any given day. Sometimes he was the adult son visiting from California. Sometimes he was the 7-year-old boy helping in the barbershop. Sometimes he was a customer who had heard that Gaetano was the best barber in town. The important thing, Dean explained to Mrs. Rossini, is that he feels safe, that he feels useful, that he maintains his dignity. If that means I have to pretend to be a little boy again, then that's what I'll do. Dean's visits became a carefully choreographed dance of love and imagination. He would arrive at the barbershop early in the morning, before Gaetano was fully awake, and slip into whichever role seemed most appropriate for his father's state of mind that day. On good days, when Gaetano recognized him as his adult son, they would sit together and Dean would listen to stories about the old country, about the early days of the barbershop, about Dean's mother and their courtship in Italy. These conversations were precious because they contained the real Gaetano, the man Dean had known all his life. On confused days, Dean would become little Dino, sweeping the floors while singing Italian folk songs, asking his papa to teach him how to hold the straight razor properly, listening wide-eyed to stories about America being the land of opportunity. On the most difficult days, when Gaetano didn't recognize him at all, Dean would simply be a customer, sitting in the barber chair, while his father carefully trimmed his hair and told him about his talented son who lived in California and sang on the television. "You remind me of him a little," Gaetano would say, studying Dean's reflection in the mirror. "Something about the eyes, the way you smile. Maybe you're related to my Dino, eh?" These visits required Dean to completely abandon his celebrity persona. There was no entourage, no special accommodations, no recognition. He stayed in the small hotel downtown, ate at the Italian restaurant where his father had been a regular for 50 years, and walked the streets of his childhood as if he'd never left. The townspeople of Steubenville knew Dean was visiting, but they respected the situation. Word spread quietly that Gaetano was having troubles and that his famous son was coming home to help. No one bothered Dean for autographs or photographs. They understood this was about family, not fame. During one visit in the spring of 1979, Dean found his father sitting in his barber chair, holding an old straight razor and staring at it in confusion. "I can't remember," Gaetano said, his voice breaking. "I can't remember how to use this. 50 years, I cut hair with this razor, and now, it's like a stranger in my hands." Dean sat down in the customer chair. "Show me, Papa. Show me how you taught me to shave." For the next hour, muscle memory took over where conscious memory had failed. Gaetano's hands found their familiar rhythm. His fingers remembered the proper angle, the correct pressure. As he worked, he began to tell Dean about learning the barber trade from his own father in Montesilvano, about the pride of a man who could earn his living with his hands and his skill. "A barber," Gaetano said, his voice becoming stronger as he worked. "A barber is like a priest, you know. People tell you their troubles, their secrets. You make them feel better about themselves. It's not just cutting hair, it's taking care of people." When the shave was finished, Gaetano looked at Dean in the mirror, and for a moment, complete recognition returned. "Dino," he whispered, "my successful son. You came home." "I'm always coming home, Papa. But you're so busy, so important. Why do you waste time with an old man who forgets everything?" Dean turned in the chair to face his father directly. "Because you didn't forget the most important things, Papa. You didn't forget how to love. You didn't forget how to take care of people. You didn't forget that famiglia comes first." Gaetano's eyes filled with tears. "I'm scared, Dino. I'm scared of disappearing." "You're not disappearing, Papa. Not as long as I remember you. Not as long as I carry everything you taught me." As Gaetano's condition worsened, Dean's visits became more frequent and more essential. He learned to navigate the strange world of dementia, where past and present blended together, where emotions remained even when facts disappeared. One of the most heartbreaking yet beautiful moments came during a visit in late 1979. Dean arrived to find his father agitated and upset, pacing around the barber shop. "Where's my boy?" Gaetano was asking Mrs. Rossini frantically. "Where's little Dino? He always helps me close the shop, but he didn't come today. Something's wrong." Dean quickly understood. In his father's mind, it was 1938 again, and 7-year-old Dino was late coming home from school. "Mr. Crocetti," Dean said, entering the shop, "I'm Dino's friend. He asked me to tell you he's okay, but he can't come to the shop today." Gaetano looked relieved. "Ah, good. He's a good boy, always sends word when he can't come. But who are you? You look like him a little." "I'm his cousin," Dean improvised. "From the big city. Dino talks about you all the time. He says you're the best papa in the world." Gaetano smiled proudly. "He said that? My little singer said that? All the time. He says when he grows up, he wants to be just like you. Strong, honest, takes care of his family." "That's good." Gaetano nodded approvingly. "That's what I try to teach him. Family first, work hard, keep your dignity." Dean spent the rest of that visit being Dino's cousin, listening to Gaetano's hopes and dreams for his little boy, his concerns about raising children in America, his determination to give his son opportunities he never had. By 1980, Gaetano could no longer manage the barbershop or his apartment. Dean quietly arranged for the best possible care at a nursing facility in Steubenville, but he insisted on maintaining his regular visits, adapting to each stage of his father's decline. In the nursing home, Gaetano often thought he was still a young man in Italy, waiting to immigrate to America. Dean learned to speak Italian again, rusty from years of disuse, so he could communicate with his father in these episodes. "Are you going to America too?" Gaetano would ask in Italian. "Maybe," Dean would reply. "What's it like there?" "They say you can become anything if you work hard enough. I want to open a shop, cut hair, raise a family. Maybe my sons will become doctors or lawyers or even," he would laugh, "maybe singers or actors. In America, anything is possible." During these conversations, Dean saw his father not as the man who had raised him, but as the young dreamer who had crossed an ocean with nothing but hope and determination. It gave him a new understanding of his own success. He had become the fulfillment of his father's wildest American dreams. The end came peacefully in December 1982. Gaetano was 85 years old and had been bedridden for several months. Dean was holding his hand when his father opened his eyes one last time and spoke with perfect clarity. "Dino, my famous son, I'm here, Papa. Did I do good? Did I raise you right?" "You did perfect, Papa. Everything I am, everything good in me, comes from you." Gaetano smiled. "Then I can rest now. Tell your mama I'm coming home." Gaetano Crocetti died that evening, with his son holding his hand and singing softly in Italian, the same lullabies Gaetano had sung to him as a child. The funeral was small but dignified. The entire Italian district of Steubenville came to pay their respects. Dean gave the eulogy in both English and Italian, speaking not as a celebrity, but as a son honoring his father. "My father came to America with a dream," Dean said, standing in the small Catholic church where he had been baptized. His dream was that his children would have better lives than he did, that they would find success in this new country. He achieved that dream. But more than that, he taught us that success without dignity is meaningless, that family is more important than fame, and that the measure of a man is not what he achieves, but how he treats the people he loves. After the funeral, Dean was approached by several townspeople who had known Gaetano for decades. "Your father talked about you every day," said Mr. Benedetto, who had run the grocery store next to the barber shop. "Even when he was confused about everything else, he never forgot how proud he was of you. But you know what he was most proud of? Not your fame, not your money. He was proud that you came home. He always said, 'My Dino remembers his familia.'" Dean Martin returned to Los Angeles and his career, but something fundamental had changed in him. The experience of caring for his father, of watching a strong man become vulnerable, had stripped away many of the protective barriers he had built around his emotions. His friends noticed the change. Frank Sinatra commented that Dean seemed more present, more connected to the people around him. His performances took on a deeper emotional resonance, as if his experience with loss and love had added new colors to his artistic palette. Most importantly, Dean's relationship with his own children became more intentional. He had seen what it meant to be truly proud of your children, not for their achievements, but for their character. He had learned from his father's final years that time was precious and unpredictable, that the moments you spend with family are the only ones that matter in the end. In 1985, Dean established the Gaetano Crocetti Foundation, dedicated to providing support for families dealing with dementia and age-related memory loss. The foundation operated quietly, offering respite care, family counseling, and educational resources without fanfare or celebrity endorsement. Dean never spoke publicly about his father's illness or his own caregiving experience. When interviewers asked about his family, he would simply say that his father had been his greatest teacher and that everything important he knew about being a man he had learned in a barbershop in Steubenville. The only people who knew the full story were the residents of Dean's hometown, who had witnessed his quiet dedication during those difficult years. They spoke of it with respect and admiration, not because Dean Martin the celebrity had honored them with his presence, but because Dino Crocetti the son had come home when his father needed him. In 1993, 2 years before Dean's own death, a local newspaper in Steubenville ran a small feature about the old barbershop on 4th Street, which had been converted into a community center for senior citizens. The article mentioned that Dean Martin's father had been the last barber to work in the building. Dean was sent a copy of the article, and tucked inside, it was a note from Mrs. Rossini, now 89 years old. Dear Dino, I wanted you to know that we turned your father's shop into a place where old people can come together, play cards, have coffee, remember better times. We kept his barber chair. Sometimes when I sit in it, I can still smell the bay rum and hear your father humming while he worked. I never told anyone else about those years when you came home to take care of him. I know you wanted it private, but I want you to know that what you did, not the famous singer, but the son, that was the most beautiful thing I ever saw. You proved that success means nothing if you forget where you came from. Your father would be so proud, not of your fame, but of the man you became when nobody was watching. Con affetto, Angela Rossini. Dean Martin kept that letter in his wallet until the day he died. When his own children found it among his personal effects, they finally understood why their father had always insisted that family came before everything else, why he had never let fame distance him from the people he loved. The story of Dean Martin and his father's final years is a reminder that our greatest performances are often the ones without audiences. It's about the courage to be vulnerable, the strength to give care instead of just receiving adulation, and the wisdom to understand that love sometimes means becoming smaller so someone else can feel larger. Gaetano Crocetti never knew that his little Dino became one of the most famous entertainers in the world. But Dean Martin learned from his father's final years that fame was just costume jewelry compared to the real treasure of being truly known and loved by the people who matter most. In the end, the King of Cool's greatest role was not in any movie or on any stage. It was in a nursing home in Ohio, holding his father's hand and proving that some performances are measured not in applause, but in the quiet dignity of showing up when showing up is all that matters. The barbershop on 4th Street is gone now, converted and reconverted, its purpose changed by time and necessity. But the lesson Gaetano Crocetti taught his son in those final confused years remains, that love is not about being remembered perfectly, but about being present completely, no matter how difficult, no matter how invisible, no matter how long it takes. Dean Martin made millions of people feel good with his music and his movies. But in his father's final years, he learned something more important than entertaining others. How to love someone who is disappearing, how to honor someone who can no longer honor themselves, and how to find meaning not in what you achieve, but in what you're willing to sacrifice for the people who made your achievements possible.